So my top 5 most overlooked slash underappreciated games. I'm going to start with Test Drive Unlimited. Now this game came out in 2006-7, and it was revolutionary because it was the first really, big MMO racing game. It was the seamless connection between online and offline. It was this open world racing game that really had everything. Really, it had the visuals, it had the cars, it had the events. You could make your own routes. You could, I just could not think of a way it could be more complete. It had bikes, it had an auction house. It wasn't that popular, and I don't see why. This was at a time where MMOs were really big, and I don't get why it wasn't big. This really is the future of racing games. I was playing it at the time, and I was thinking, this really is where racing games are going to go. And I'm just surprised not many games have picked up on it. Secondly, Mafia, the City of Lost Heaven, 2002 game. Very sophisticated game and one of the best looking games at the time. Phenomenal voice acting. The story is kind of similar to Goodfellas, but it's probably the only game where I've really cared about the story. The characters, oh god. If you look at the Wikipedia page for a list of Mafia characters and stuff, the story was just so deep, and it wasn't like the most it wasn't the most original story, but it really felt like it was like one of those classic Goodfellas, Godfather kind of movies, but in a video game. It was true art. I don't think any video game ever has pulled off something like Mafia, because video games now, they just tend to follow this set structure. If we're a shooter, we're just going to do this. If we're a GTA clone, we're going to do this. Nothing's really tried that kind of classic, trying to make this Goodfellas, and it really had good gameplay. It was a very realistic game. It did look nice, it did play well. The story it's the best story I've ever come across in a video game. I really urge anyone to check it out.
The only classic kind of game that comes to mind that's tried anything close is LA Noire, but it's a totally different context.
Yeah.
It's the only one that's managed to kind of do that kind of city, but totally different game, as to say.
Mafia is like Goodfellas as a game. I just cannot express how underrated it is. If you've played Mafia 2, you definitely need to go and play the first one. It's a lot better in terms of the story. It's much less generic. Thirdly, The Godfather, for similar reasons really, but instead of it being the story, which a lot of people like, The Godfather, it's the highest rated film of all time, and how is the game going to live up to it? But got to bear in mind that in the game you play as a fictional character and interact with all the characters in the game, and what it does so well is it cuts out because the movie is like 3 hours long, and to be honest, a lot of it could have been cut out. But in the game, you only do the interesting parts, and what's more is the Godfather had all these taking over the shops, the racket protection. You really felt like you rose to power. You start the game as this rookie getting beaten up on the street, and you build up your skills. It's got this kind of RPG upgrading element. It's got this really, I want to call it free flow, but I don't want to associate it with Batman. Kind of the combat, into the hand-to-hand combat is you feel like you do everything. It's really unique. The gunplay, the cover system, it worked really, really well. You felt like it wasn't super easy, but it wasn't a challenge. You actually felt like you were in a gunfight. You could upgrade weapons, and the level design was fairly good, because you get to play those classic. You see those scenes in The Godfather, and you actually get to do them. So I really think that game was overlooked. 76 on Metacritic is not giving it enough credit.
What is interesting from my point of view is that I've recently played The Godfather 2 based off Sina's impressions and experiences of The Godfather, and it's laughable how terrible The Godfather 2 is, and how embarrassing it is that it's actually below the standard of the original game by a long shot.
Yeah, I mean the original game, the creating the character, I was really impressed with. I thought it nailed everything. The open world element, because I just thought, oh, it's going to be another, crappy GTA clone. It really isn't. I think they captured this kind of 1930s and the Godfather universe and the characters really well. But a lot of people will complain that, oh, it's not. It's the same thing that people said about Mafia, really. The reason it was overlooked is because it came out at the same time as like GTA 3 on PC. And we all know about the almighty GTA. Can't compete with that. But Mafia is nothing like a GTA. Comparing Mafia to GTA is just not a valid comparison. It's not like comparing COD and Battlefield. It's more like comparing COD and Hitman. It just... no. They're not competitors. Fourth one, gotta be Mirror's Edge. Mirror's Edge is one of my all-time favourites because it's not just because it's different, but because it managed to get the gameplay there and make it so fluent. Like, you go from the levels, like the art style, it really worked. That's the thing, because the concept, it sounds kind of dodgy when someone says it to you, but it really just worked. I was surprised at how fluent it is, how satisfying it is to play the game, how you progressing through levels, start of level, cutscene, end up, and then do some running, and some a bit of like combat with enemies, but the way that the game progressed, the story progressed through the gameplay, I was really surprised by it.
It's amazing how well linked everything in Mirror's Edge is.
Yeah.
It's a very seamless integration between the story, between the running, between the different sections, and how the game reuses those.
It's intense. You don't feel like there's these scripted parts. It all feels kind of like a movie. It really. But like you play it all. You play the entire thing. So I really like that, and the amount of replay value doing the time trials, that's absolutely my favourite part. Lastly, but definitely not least, is Blur. Now Blur is a game that most people probably won't have heard of. It did not sell anything. I think it sold like 30,000 copies at launch. It's not on the Steam store page anymore. It's a very, very, very unheard of game, really. And it's probably because, Bizarre Creations, I have to say, they make like my favourite racing game. They make PGR. But this is like one of their games, the last games they made before they went bust. And what's so special about Blur is how it takes... The problem at racing games I've had with really arcadey racing games is they're just boring to play. Like Mario Kart, I just don't feel like it's exciting or anything like that. What Blur does is it takes licensed cars and it has a proper career mode, it has proper multiplayer, it has the split screen, has the custom game modes, it has the different categories of cars that you can race in. It has all that, but it's combined that with simple controls, cars that actually handle and behave differently, right? And it's got power-ups which are, really good. They've got the variety of power-ups. You've got like pure racing, you've got the different games, you've got time trial, you've got drift. All with very simple controls, like forward, left, right, brake. It's still like simple Mario Kart controls, but with licensed cars and with a proper like driving mechanics, with power-ups, with different event types, with like a proper career mode, with like an unlock system. It's a proper game.
I think one of the other standout features that Sina's not mentioned yet is that most racing games don't capture the sense of speed anymore, whereas Blurred has this kind of ability to just say, oh, you're in this car, it goes this fast, and you'll feel like you're going that fast. And even games like such as Forza, which are massive, don't give you that feeling that Blur does.
Yeah, and Blur's art style is something really to commend. I really like the use of the colours, and they've got a good mix between the tracks. They've got these street circuits that you go around, they've got a bit of off-road here and there. Really, Blur is a solid product. There's no programming issues, there's no grinding issues, there's no issues with it at all. I really cannot see why this game is not, apart from the Mario branding. If you took Mario off the Mario Kart, Blur should absolutely blow it. I really think Blur, just purely because it was so poorly promoted, because it was on a low budget, but if Blur had the financial backing and it had the brand and it was really pushed by Activision, it could have been huge.